Funding for Lawmakers comes from
the University of West Georgia in Carrollton, ensuring a better life for Georgians in the 21st century. More than 100 programs of study prepare students for successful careers in the critical professions of education and nursing, as well as business and the liberal arts. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of Georgia's business community, over 4,000 members strong, working with lawmakers for over 90 years to make sure that our state remains a place where companies thrive.
and by supporters of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thank you.
Coming up on Lawmakers, Labor Commissioner Michael Thurmond urges Governor Sonny Perdue to accept federal stimulus monies for unemployment. The first of the governor's tort reform measures fails to pass out of committee. And two bills which aim to help Atlanta's transit system, MARTA, pass the Senate. Those stories and more are coming up next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers. Here are your anchors, and Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening, everyone. Also on tonight's broadcast, a hearing on the governor's initiative to overhaul the state's transportation agencies. And the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce sponsors a forum on school board governance legislation. But first, our top story tonight, controversy over accepting certain federal stimulus dollars. Labor Commissioner Michael Thurmond joined the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus today to urge Governor Perdue to accept federal stimulus dollars to shore up the Unemployment Trust Fund.
I don't think our trust fund is going to become insolvent, but if it does, everyone who qualifies for a benefit will continue to receive it. And I want that to be clear, because I've read the blogs and some of the response. There is no scenario when individuals who legally qualify for unemployment insurance benefits will not receive that benefit, regardless of the state of Georgia's trust fund. The group of the population that's most at risk in not taking the money are the employers who pay the taxes. If the trust fund becomes insolvent, we would have to borrow money, and when you borrow money, that will negate or necessitate a huge increase in Georgia's taxes that employers pay. The money that I'm advocating for, that we take, is not necessarily to benefit the job seekers. It is to protect Georgia's employers who do not need to be saddled with a huge tax increase in the middle of a recession.
Governor Perdue's spokesman Burt Brantley says the governor would rather focus on the guarantee of Medicaid dollars.
They normally fund about 65% of the program. They will now fund 70% for the next couple of fiscal years, which does reduce the amount that the state has to contribute to the program. So that frees up state dollars to use in other ways, which will help us meet the growing demands of the state while also seeing lower revenues. So there's no strings attached in terms of increasing enrollment or causing a long-term burden on the taxpayers. We can maintain our service at existing levels.
The first installment of the federal Medicaid money is expected to be released to the state tomorrow.
Governor Sonny Perdue's first of two tort reform bills which aim to spur economic growth in Georgia failed to pass out of the Senate Economic Development Committee this afternoon. SB 101 would have granted biomedical companies based in Georgia or have at least 200 employees in Georgia immunity from lawsuits. Governor Perdue's Senate Floor Leader Bill Calzard explains a last-minute substitute to the bill which lifted immunity from compensatory damages but left in immunity for punitive damages. He is followed by Senator George Hooks and Angie Childers of the Georgia Trial Lawyers Association, who has spoken out against this bill since it was introduced.
If you were to have manufactured a drug in a defective manner or designed a drug in a defective manner, you could still be sued for compensatory damages, so any Georgia resident would be able to recover their damages for medical expenses, lost wages, and their pain and suffering, but would not be able to get punitive damages from a drug manufacturer if they went through the FDA approval process in good faith without committing any fraud on the FDA.
Technically, you could be making some device down on the Rio Grande or something, or in India, and Georgia citizens would be the only ones that'd be giving up the right to sue if I had a bad hip or a knee or something.
That's correct.
The only thing these companies have to do to avoid liability is simply tell the FDA and the doctors who prescribe their drugs everything they know about their drugs. That's it. When they do that, we don't have a claim against them. This takes away the incentive they have to let the FDA and the public and the doctors know about conditions that weren't apparent in their drug when it was first approved for marketing.
Again, SB 101 did not pass out of committee, receiving 7 nay votes and 4 in favor.
The Senate Transportation Committee met today on a proposal for a new state agency charged with overseeing all future transportation projects. Lawmakers Valarie Edwards is standing by live at the Capitol with this report. Valarie.
And Wandy, last week we saw Governor Perdue standing shoulder to shoulder with the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House to announce a 3-way meeting of the minds on easing the state's transportation woes. Today, for the first time, we got a glimpse of Senate Bill 200, titled the Transforming Transportation Investment Act. To create the new State Transportation Agency, the act combines the Greater Regional Transportation Authority with the State Road and Tollway Authority. Senate Speaker Pro Tem Tommy Williams spoke in favor of the measure at today's meeting.
If any of you all think as good as many of these folks are that we've appointed over there, that they can actually get those roads out of that building that was across the street, I just have not found that they've been able to do that.
Here's a look at how the new agency is supposed to work. Every 4 years, the State Transportation Authority will develop long and short-range transportation plans. Every 2 years, those plans will be updated, which the Governor and the General Assembly will review. And annually, the agency will submit its budget to the Governor and to the General Assembly.
This guarantees all those cities and counties out there that there will be LARP money, that there will be local assistance, and they don't have those guarantees now. In fact, many of those projects were cut out because DOT felt like staff was more important than getting those projects done.
Appointments to the board of the new agency will come 5 from the Governor and 3 each from the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House. And that worries at least one lawmaker concerned with what he describes as a concentration of power at the top.
This is rolling back to the days of Talmadge, where he can control the members on the board and the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor. I just don't believe it should be in their hands. And to come in and just totally slash a board to pieces like they are trying to do with these pieces of legislation is ludicrous.
The Senate Transportation Committee reconvenes tomorrow. No word yet on when the measure will reach the full Senate. Reporting live, I'm Valarie Edwards for Lawmakers.
Okay, thanks for that report, Valarie. Well, 2 bills which aim to help MARTA pass the Senate today. The first, SB 89, allows the sale of food and beverages inside transit stations. Bill sponsor Senator Gloria Butler explains that this measure is a way to help generate much-needed money for MARTA.
These new business opportunities will also provide customer conveniences, as a result increasing ridership and creating happier customers. The passage of this legislation will open up many revenue-generating options to transit agencies throughout the state, such as Athens, Savannah, and MARTA. Selling food and beverages and other items are not new ideas in the transit industry. As a matter of fact, in the New York City Transit Authority, they have over 458 subway stations with more than 350 concessions or stores in the stations that offer a source of substantial revenue for the authority.
Now, SB 89 ended up passing 43-4, and then they moved on to the second MARTA-related bill, SB 120, which revises the MARTA Act of 1965, which bill sponsor Senator Doug Stoner says has tax provisions that don't pertain to the laws of today.
MARTA is required under their sales tax that they collect, their local money they collect, to split it evenly between operations and capital. In fact, they're the only transit system in the United States, in the sense of a large urban transit system, that has this requirement. I used to be the chairman of a transit system here in Metro Atlanta in Cobb County, and no other transit system in the state is required to do this. And so in the sense, this rule was written for a reason in the sense of leveraging federal dollars back in the days when the federal government was handing out large quantities of federal capital dollars, and those days pretty much have passed. Basically what this does, it gives MARTA the flexibility that almost any transit agency has in the sense of how to determine how to use their money. In the sense, it is a revenue neutral bill. The agency is not coming to us asking for help. They're asking to give them the ability to help themselves, similar to the bill that the senator from the 55th just did in the sense of raising additional revenues.
And SB 120 passed 39-9, so both MARTA bills now go over to the House. Well, legislation which puts a prohibition on the establishment of sanctuary cities passed the Senate today. Currently, there are no sanctuary cities in Georgia. However, Senator Emanuel Jones says a measure like SB 20 sends the wrong message. Bill sponsor Senator Chip Pearson explains the legislation.
It's a prohibition against the establishment of so-called sanctuary cities. Although there are no sanctuary cities as officially designated by resolution or ordinance at the local level in the state of Georgia currently, there are at least 60 across the country and several more are in the works. Basically, what this bill would do would prohibit those from being officially recognized, or also would require that, as is federal law, that the local law enforcement officials work with federal law enforcement and ICE as to determining when folks that are arrested or otherwise detained are here in opposition to the federal laws on being here legally.
Senate Bill 20 is a bill that's really in search of a problem. There are no sanctuary cities in the state of Georgia. And if there are no sanctuary cities in the state of Georgia, why would we need Senate Bill 20? Well, the only reason I can think of why Senate Bill 20 would be needed would be we want to put a solution out there before we even recognize that there's a problem anywhere in the state of Georgia.
SB 20 passed 37-9 and goes to the House. And a note, a similar measure from Senator Pearson did pass last year, but did not get through both chambers by day 40.
The House today voted to provide tax credits for businesses that contribute to private school scholarships. Representative Earl Earhart says House Bill 100 will benefit students, but House Democrats, including Representative Brian Thomas, call the measure a backdoor voucher program that will cost the state millions.
Say you're a rich attorney from, I don't know, Buckhead or Sandy Springs or someplace like that, and you're pulling in $500,000 a year. So your tax burden, your tax liability on that $500,000 is about $30,000. So if you send your child to a private school, which costs under 75% of your tax liability, so we'll round it down to $22,000, then you can send your child to school on the state of Georgia's taxpayers' dime.
This would result in a $50 million reduction in state revenues, according to Representative DuBose Porter.
If the QBE formula was fully funded and we had plenty of money and the best public education in our schools, and the buildings and the programs and the transportation and the classroom size and the technology, then maybe we could afford to look at this. But we don't.
Bill sponsor Earl Earhart accused Democrats of political grandstanding.
There is no fiscal consequence. You heard about all the things that we're not going to be able to fund because of this bill. That, once again, is a stalking horse. There is no consequence to this budget. If anything, the state saves money from the program that was passed last year. There'd be a fiscal note if there was a consequence. The budget committees are not, let me say that one more time, not considering any fiscal consequences. No nurses will be affected, no teachers, no one, zero. You can say that all you want. You can argue the underlying bill. That's just not the case.
HB 100 passed 98-69. The measure next moves to the Senate.
There were mixed opinions on the Senate floor today about SB 30, which deals with regulations on gasoline blending. 3 amendments to the bill were voted down, but not before 1 hour of debate on the subject. Bill sponsor Senator Ross Tollison begins.
What this does is make sure that your distributors all across this state, your local distributors, have the option to purchase the unblended fuel, which is already at the terminal. It's not anything that they have to keep extra at the terminal. It's just unblended fuel at the terminal. They can purchase it that way, unblended, just like they're doing today. No different than we've been doing today, no different than we've been doing for the last few years as we continue to grow the alternative fuel business in this state.
The people with the truck, they want to buy the 84 octane gasoline and then make a decision as to how much ethanol they're going to blend. If ethanol is expensive, they're going to put in less ethanol. If ethanol is cheap, they're going to put in more ethanol. So you'll have varying qualities of gasoline delivered to the gas station. That's the real reason for this amendment. What Amendment number 1 says that if the gasoline is offered for sale under a trademark name, say it's Texaco, and you buy Texaco gasoline at the gas station, that Texaco should have the right to contract to control the quality of its product. It should have the right to insist that it can blend its own gasoline product in accordance with federal law.
I've heard all kind of crazy stuff. If you think that you drive up to a BP station and you know that fuel coming out of that ground is BP fuel, you're crazy. I mean, this fuel comes into the terminal and it's brokered by everybody on God's green earth. A vote against this bill is a vote to help strangle alternative fuels in the state of Georgia.
And SB 30 ended up passing 35-13 with none of the amendments added on. The fluids of cadavers could soon be the next tool to help train dogs when it comes to finding bodies. The Senate unanimously passed SB 38 today. Senator Seth Harp explains.
This allows them to train the animals, or in the case of someone that is abducted and murdered and maybe their body is buried in some shallow grave somewhere, this allows them to use bodily fluids and blood to train these animals, so these animals can be sensitized and appropriately trained and help find the remains of loved ones when and if some catastrophe has occurred. Amendment number 1 changes the thrust of the bill from human body parts to blood and human bodily fluids.
Again, SB 38 passed 43-0 and now goes over to the House.
We'd like to invite you to check out GPB's online resources at gpb.org/lawmakers. Find the latest from GPB Radio News and watch Lawmakers online. All that and more is at gpb.org/lawmakers. We invite you to visit that site and vote in our legislative issue poll. We'll bring you the results of that poll later this week.
Now that the stimulus package is making its way to our state, many are wondering if it will affect Georgia's children. And Lawmakers Brittany Evans is here with us with the details on how that package is going to impact Georgia. Brittany.
Thanks, David. Mark Washington, the Assistant Commissioner for DFACS and Child Support for the Department of Human Resources, briefed the House Children and Youth Committee this afternoon on the stimulus's effect. The briefing had many representatives asking questions and voicing concerns.
I want to know what the plan for the department is.
Today, the Department of Human Resources, Mark Washington, stressed the importance of accountability and transparency as the stimulus money comes to Georgia. The funds appropriated under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act are available until September 30th, 2010. Washington touched on several state programs today that impact Georgia's youth, including Medicaid, food stamps, child care, and various public health programs. Georgia's Medicaid program will see an increase in the amount of money the federal government will match. The food stamp program will also see an increase, 13.6% to be exact, in monthly benefits. Child care in Georgia can see an increase of $82 million over the next 2 years. Immunization, prevention and wellness, and nutrition programs will all see millions nationally. The questions still loom, however, as to the hows, whens, and regulations on the funds. Mark Washington explained.
I've learned that guessing with the feds will lead me to a batting zero. I think the key is for us is that when we do receive those restrictions and guidelines, that we work at a high speed to make sure that we're planful and we have a way to accurately track, and again to assure that if they have a set of allowable activities, that those are actual problems that are specific to Georgia.
Now, several representatives were worried about having enough time to make allocation decisions. Washington said the Department of Human Resources will be very vigilant during this holding period, trying to gather as much information as possible.
Okay, good report. Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you.
And in other news, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce this morning encouraged business community support of Senate Bill 84. That's the governor's proposal to reform school board governance with mandatory training, codes of ethics, and penalties up to removal of board members. According to GE Vice President John Rice, the measure makes good business sense and it's good for kids.
My interest in this started back when I was involved in the Chamber Education Committee, and I was struck by comments that I got from some of the superintendents that were involved in this effort to regionalize about how much time they had to spend facilitating dysfunctional boards and basically managing up. And in some cases it was 40% or more of their time. And I remember thinking that that's just not a job a good person would want for a long period of time.
But the Georgia School Boards Association rejects the idea that a school board member could be removed at the behest of another member or the governor without a referendum.
We offered that suggestion to them that rather than the removal and appointment, that it simply be sent back for a special election.
SB 84 is expected to be heard by the full Senate tomorrow.
Senator Eric Johnson is proposing legislation to protect the secret ballot in union organizing elections. Senate Resolution 108 is a direct response to the Employee Free Choice Act expected to pass in U.S. Congress. This measure replaces the secret ballots with publicly signed union cards. Senator Johnson says his legislation works to protect Georgia employees.
Washington and the new administration is planning on passing a law that would make it easier for unions to come into right-to-work states like Georgia and then through potential intimidation sign up votes for that unionization. So what we're proposing is a Georgia constitutional amendment that would require all ballots to be secret, including those for employee representation.
Now, in support of Senator Johnson's legislation is Mike Glavine with the Associated Builders Contractors. He talks about the negative effects of the EFCA.
The Free Choice Act would open up the union organization process to a whole heck of a lot of coercion and intimidation that organized labor has routinely done over the years in union organizing campaigns. It would not allow the employer to give their side of the story and would basically disenfranchise all of the construction workers that are non-union in our industry.
Now, SR 108 has been assigned to the Senate Insurance and Labor Committee, where it is awaiting a hearing. A bill to have Georgia Power customers pay in advance for a planned nuclear expansion near Augusta cleared a major hurdle in the General Assembly on Monday. The House Energy, Utility, and Telecommunications Committee voted 15-3 to approve SB 31. Now, that move comes in advance of a planned Public Service Commission hearing early next month. Supporters say the measure will cut approximately $300 million from the project's estimated $14 billion price tag. Representative Don Wicks of Mableton tried and failed to attach an amendment to the bill after learning that more than $1.5 billion paid by customers of Georgia Power would not finance the debt for the nuclear reactors, but would go to Georgia Power shareholders. If SB 31 is signed by the governor, average monthly electric bills would increase by $1.30 a month starting in 2011 and continuing to increase until the plant's scheduled completion in 2017. A bill that would require all driver's license exams administered in Georgia to be given in English was heard in the Senate Public Safety Committee today. Lawmakers Minu Hosseini joins us with that. Minu.
David, Senate Bill 67 would reduce the number of languages that the written driver's license test is offered in from 13 to 1.
That the written driving test be given in English only at the driver's license when they apply for their driver's license. And this is for permanent residents only. It doesn't have anything to do with the other code sections. Doesn't have anything to do with temporary license being issued. Doesn't have anything to do with current license being issued verbally by the examiners in case somebody is illiterate. Those code sections are still in force.
But a representative from the ACLU said that Senate Bill 67 would violate federal law by limiting access to their programs to those with English proficiency. After much debate, the Senate Public Safety Committee decided to postpone voting on Senate Bill 67 until next week.
Last week, we heard from Kelly Wiggins, whose sister was murdered. Today, she and other relatives of murder victims implored the Senate Special Judiciary Committee to give victims more options for addressing a court prior to sentencing. The committee unanimously gave Senate Bill 151 a do-pass recommendation after hearing some emotional testimony, including some from Wayne and Claudia Brown, whose 21-year-old daughter was murdered 5 years ago.
And this is why I said in favor of this bill, is to allow the video presentation to display the life of these people. This is what the jury needs to see. Okay, they sit there and they hear about this convicted murderer. They hear the family say, oh, he's great, he loves literature, he loves music, da-da-da-da-da-da. Why can't we allow the jury to learn and to know the victims, to humanize the victims?
The Senate Special Judiciary Committee also gave Senate Bill 115 a due pass. The bill is intended to make it easier to charge people who repeatedly drive on a suspended license.
Governor Perdue's proposed cuts to the 2010 budget are expected to heavily impact Georgia's education system, notably cuts to school nurses. Today at the Capitol, nurses and PTA members came together to voice their opposition. Lawmakers Alan Friedman has that story.
School nurses and PTA members from across Georgia demonstrated outside the Capitol today in opposition to Governor Perdue's proposed 2010 education budget. The budget makes cuts in several areas, most notably a complete elimination of the state's funding for school nurses, totaling $30 million. I asked Karen Hallisey, the legislative chair for Georgia PTA, what effects we might see from these cuts.
Well, you're already seeing it today. DeKalb County is a great example. They have had to severely modify the kind of transportation that is provided to students. Textbooks don't get renewed as quickly. There will be teacher cuts. The bottom line is there will now be teacher cuts, and it will hurt the classroom. We are looking at a year where there's the state dollars are down and the local dollars are down.
I also spoke on the phone with Bert Brantley, the director of communications for the governor's office, who told me that he was disappointed to see how the budget cuts were portrayed by the demonstrators today. He said that the governor supports what school nurses do, but that the state simply doesn't have the money to continue funding them. Instead, they want to give the money to local systems and let them decide how they want to use it. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Alan Friedman.
And coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, Governor Sonny Perdue meets with state agency heads to discuss the federal economic stimulus funds. We'll have that story and all the latest Capitol news tomorrow night on Lawmakers at 7 p.m. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. on GPB or 7 a.m. on GPB Knowledge. Keep up with all the action under the Gold Dome daily on GPB Radio during Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and Georgia Gazette. Coming up next here on GPB Television, it's Georgia Outdoors. Tonight's episode features fire ecology. Georgia Outdoors is next here on GPB.
And as our broadcast for this, the 22nd legislative day of 2009, I'm David Zelsky.
And I'm Nwandi Lawson. Please join us tomorrow night for Lawmakers. Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.